Baby, baby.
Hello, listeners. It's your boy NotoriousSA, aka Steve Anderson, aka Sick of Being Sick. My apologies for my voice. I have been sick for the last week. Not COVID, thank goodness, but the regular terrible cold, runny nose, sore throat, coughing, all that stuff. So, if it sounds like I've been screaming for the last 4 days and decided to record a podcast, it's not because I've been screaming. I've just been coughing a lot. And I know my voice doesn't sound great right now, but I needed to say what I'm about to say because it's driving me crazy. It's driving me absolutely insane what is happening in the world, at least in America, at least in Wisconsin right now. My previous episode was called Kyle Rittenhouse and the Collapse of Personal Responsibility. In that episode, I talked about my brief thoughts over the Kyle Rittenhouse trial before the jury had gone to deliberations and rendered a verdict. If you haven't heard, verdict came back not guilty on all counts. For many legal observers who know the fine technicalities of the law, this wouldn't have been a surprise. There's a video in the description from Legal, which I watched earlier, which really does a good job of summarizing the case and the technicalities involved in it. Highly recommend you watch it if you want a good explainer. It's very fair, doesn't take any sides, just what does the law say about these situations? And you know what happened after the verdict happened? I took a stock of what I said, and I realized what I said is that I said Kyle Rittenhouse had possibly lied on the stand. I'm here to say that's incorrect. I understand that he, quote-unquote, lied at the riot that was happening about his EMT status, but he did not lie on the stand, and I don't want to say that he would be guilty of perjury because he was acquitted of all charges, and frankly, under the law and under deliberations that were there, it seemed like the appropriate verdict. That's not to say he's a hero. He's not. That's not to say he's a white supremacist who got away with murder. He did not. He's a kid who brought a gun, got himself in a bad situation, and the law said that it wasn't murder. It was self-defense. That should be really the end of the story. But you know what happened after the verdict came out? I see people saying stuff that we found out wasn't true and isn't accurate weeks ago. Even after the verdict was read, people kept saying, he brought a gun across state lines. He didn't. It's very clear he did not bring a gun across state lines. That's the biggest one I hear all the time. It was repeated by talk show hosts. It was repeated by the governor of our state, Governor Pritzker. It was repeated by the Cook County Health Department for some reason. I don't know. Why are they involved in this? I'm not sure, but, I'll get to it later. A bunch of people were mad that he was acquitted because for some reason this means white supremacy happened, even though he shot other white people at a riot. Everyone likes to talk about it was a peaceful protest and he shot protesters. No, it was a riot. People were rioting, and some of the rioters tried to attack him. And based on the complexity of self-defense laws in Wisconsin, and the fact that the charge of having a rifle underage was tossed out, people got so invested in the narrative that even when we have a public trial where all the facts are held out and a jury of his peers finds him not guilty, they still repeat misinformation because they're so mad that they can't possibly think it's far more complex than that. It's obviously bigger than Kyle Rittenhouse. That whole thing is bigger than Kyle Rittenhouse. And you know what? Oh, I'm watching CNN just to see what coverage was, and I literally just tried to record something and I lost the audio, so I'm trying to repeat everything I said. But you know what else happened over the course of the weekend? While people were saying that now, because of Kyle Rittenhouse's verdict, vigilantism is now everywhere, that we're going to see people with guns show up and shoot people at protests. You know what we saw on Sunday in Waukesha, Wisconsin? You know what happened at a Christmas parade filled with families and children who were celebrating Christmas? A monster, not a man, a monster, drove his SUV at high speeds through a crowd of people. A crowd of people, including children. And if you haven't seen the videos, they're disturbing, but you should see them, because the world needs to know what this monster did. He almost hits a child. He almost hit several other people, and then the most terrifying one, captured from, it looks like, higher level, was him plowing through a group of people walking in the parade. Bodies being tossed like crash test dummies. Eerily reminiscent of Charlottesville 2017, when a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd of protesters, killing a person and injuring many others. Now, we all remember Charlottesville. We remember the terror of watching it happen, basically live streamed. And what happened afterwards? Every major media outlet went there to interview people, to see what their stories were, to talk about it, to be there. And they were there for days, if not weeks afterwards. Obviously, that was 2017, so that was, 30 million years ago, and we live in somehow a different world, but obviously not that different. A monster named Darrell Brooks Jr., a 39-year-old African-American male, was arrested and charged with multiple counts of homicide. As of now, and this is just what I'm reading, 5 people have died, 48 are injured, including dozens of children. Children! So, immediately after this happens, everyone is trying to figure out what happened and why someone would do something so terrible. And then, when it was discovered that they matched a name to the car, that name, Darrell Brooks Jr., people began to investigate. People began to see who could do something so awful, who could do something so unimaginably terrible. And it turns out, a terrible person, because that's what Darrell Brooks Jr. is. He's a terrible person. He has a criminal history dating back to 1999, an extensive rap sheet. You know what the worst part is? He's been charged with so many crimes. Last year, in 2020, he was charged with recklessly endangering safety and being a felon in possession of a firearm. So he was convicted of crimes before he was convicted of crimes. Most recently, he was out on bail for $1,000 for running over the mother of his child with his car. $1,000. Got out. Kyle Rittenhouse needed $2 million bail for what was arguably self-defense. And this violent scumbag with a history of violent scumbaggery got out on $1,000 bail. Because the prosecutor wants racial equity and decided that, you know what, I guess we should release violent felons back on bail because, we need to consider their feelings. And we need to consider, Not just the non-violent drug offenders who couldn't afford it. Apparently we need to let the violent people out too. Especially the ones with multiple violent felonies on their records who then continue to commit violent felonies. But what are you going to do? It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in San Francisco. It's happening in all these jurisdictions where they, maybe with good intentions, thought that they could try to somehow keep the prison population down with pre-trial detainees. And with coronavirus, we obviously have people out. But what's happening is that a lot of people who commit terrible crimes with guns and violence are back out on the street within hours or a day of being charged with these crimes. And Darrell Brooks Jr. was one of these people. I went through, because I couldn't sleep because I'm sick and I was so angry, when I found out who this person was, I started Googling and I found other people who had found social media that was connected to this individual. And apparently he was a rapper under the name Matchboy Fly. I found a Facebook page. And you know how this goes. Social media gets taken down and scrubbed because we all know Meta, aka Facebook, isn't going to leave that up very long. So when I found it, I just started screenshotting everything I could, for nearly the last year. Because this man's public statements might give us an indication of what he was thinking when he did it. And guess what? And just so you know, there is going to be a link. I put out a Twitter thread about it with the images that are attached. And you know what we see? We see a violent, radicalized man posting stuff that's being shared by the mainstream media and progressives. Not everything, but a lot of it. There's posts that insult women. The first one I found, I believe, was Lizzo. There's posts attacking transgender people. There's posts about cops being bad, and he has the right to shoot at them. How cops are all white supremacist monsters who murder black people. There's other social media out there that's been covered by other people, and I don't have it all, and you can find it. But what I saw, looking back over a year of Facebook posts, is a person who clearly has an animus towards the police, an animus towards women, an animus towards trans people, a violent history, and a belief that violence is acceptable, as he says in his rap videos, as is shown by his convictions for his previous and charges for previous violent crimes. Take a step back for a second. Remember Kenosha and Kyle Rittenhouse? We had video of it too. Within days, New York Times, mainstream media, had it all put together. Had an entire timeline set up, video and all, showing the incident in which Kyle used his weapon in self-defense to kill people under the law. And as I said earlier, facts of the case are there. But we talked about it nonstop. It was talked about nonstop how this is the problem in America. This man, this young kid who brought a gun at a place he shouldn't have, is showing that vigilanteism and shooting people for sport is now apparently the way things work in America. It's not. It's a bunch of people being mad about what happened, even though he shot white people at a Black Lives Matter protest that turned into a riot. And you know what? Kyle Rittenhouse had $2 million bail. Darrell Brooks Jr., who before this ran over the mother of his child with his car, $1,000 bail. Back on the street. He ran over a woman with his car after multiple other crimes he's been convicted of. And he got back on the street for $1,000. And all in the meantime, all the time we learn about this man's criminal history, he's posting on Facebook and whatever else social websites about white people are evil, cops are evil, the system is rigged against every single person. Justifying violence, defending R. Kelly. By the way, he's also apparently a convicted sex offender, so defending R. Kelly, good one. Defending another rapper sentenced to 4 decades in prison for trafficking. You know what we have here? We have a 39-year-old man glorifies violence to satisfy whatever terrible, messed up needs he has in life. And guess what? After Kyle Rittenhouse, nobody was afraid to label him a white supremacist. In fact, a lot of people, including the President of the United States, now then candidate Joe Biden. Not true at all. No one's apologized for it. No one's apologized for just, not even like that they have to say that their political opinions are wrong. Just facts of the matter. Just say that you didn't have the facts. And now that you have the facts, you've adjusted your thoughts accordingly. No, they just know. Even though there's no evidence of Kyle Rittenhouse ever showing any animosity, and even after he has an interview with Tucker Carlson where he says, I'm a Black Lives Matter supporter. If the prosecutors could do this to me, imagine what they do to people of color without the resources. Yes! That's exactly the message he should be sending. And you know what? Everyone says crocodile tears. LeBron James said he had crocodile tears. Colin Kaepernick said he was an entitled white man. Well, guess what? Karma has a funny way of coming around. Guess who was a fan of LeBron James? Guess who was a fan of Colin Kaepernick? Darrell Brooks Jr. Publicly posted support of them because he is radicalized to believe that it's not his fault he keeps getting arrested for violent crimes. It's white supremacy and an entire white supremacist system that's keeping him down. Not his own terrible deeds and lack of accountability to himself. No, it's clearly everyone else's fault he's a violent monster. And you know what? Apparently the prosecution in Milwaukee thinks so, because they obviously were very okay with letting him go out on $1,000 bail. It's sickening. It's sickening is what it is. I'm watching TV now. They said he's going to go to trial. Where is the press coverage? Where is CNN? Where's MSNBC? Where's Fox? Where's all the media outlets who show up to every other tragedy and interview every person they can find for days or weeks afterwards? Where are they now? Why aren't they talking to the parents of children who are injured? About people whose lives have been lost? About the trauma experienced by people watching people get flung in the air like crash test dummies from a monster who drove his car through a crowd of people? Where is the media? Nowhere. They're nowhere. They fit it in between coverage of the trial of the killers of Aubrey Ahmed and, of course, more Kyle Rittenhouse coverage. Why are we still talking about Kyle Rittenhouse? A monster drove a car through a parade of people, including children, killing old women and possibly hurting and maybe even killing children depending on what happens. And why are they not talking about it 24/7? Why is it not on every news outlet? Why is it not every story? Do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because these same people in the media, these same people who, without evidence, and even when evidence was presented, just said whatever the fuck they felt like about Kyle Rittenhouse because their personal feelings matter most, no one is mentioning it. I was watching The View on Monday. Talked about it for a second. And what happened? Immediately started talking about Kyle Rittenhouse. And Joy Behar repeated the false claim that he brought a gun across state lines. And Sonny Hostin, former federal prosecutor, defender of women who were abused, who knows the law, by the way, is disgusted with the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. Sure, it's only been a couple days and they haven't talked about it, but I'm very curious to see what they say about this man. What they say about this man who is an active criminal, active defender of sex offenders, is a sex offender, and ran over women with his car and got out on bail and ran over more people, who was an active supporter of Black Lives Matter and LeBron James and Colin Kaepernick. Are they going to talk about it? Are they going to comb through every detail of his life? We've obviously found the rap sheet, that was there. I don't see anybody talking about his social media posts. His graphic, radicalized social media posts. Not just attacking white people, attacking women of color, attacking trans people of color. A radical, angry, bitter man who believes violence is the way to apparently assert his dominance in life. Who clearly indicated that based on what was happening, it wasn't just okay. It's justified to kill white people. Where does he get that message from? Now, the mainstream media doesn't obviously say that, but guess what? They echo claims of Nicole Hannah-Jones and Ibram Kendi and all these other people who say that white supremacy is inherent in everything we do. Everything. We know America has a racist past, and we know America is still dealing with the effects of systemic racism, the drug war, incarceration, all that stuff. All of that is true. But did you ever take the second to think that when you talk about Kyle Rittenhouse and you spread misinformation about him and you say things that even though he protected himself with self-defense under the law, if you say irresponsible things like now it's legal for people to just go murder people and for somehow to tie it to white supremacy and say that this is the future, that Kyle Rittenhouses everywhere with their little swastika patches and guns are just going to shoot people at random? What's amazing is that they always talked about Trump and how his actions radicalized people, which they did, and how it caused people to commit violent acts, which they did. Do they ever stop to think to ask themselves if they say stuff that's not true and poisons people's minds over and over and over again, that eventually some terrible person will take that as an indication that it's okay for them to do what they do? And you know what? I'll say right now, we don't know all the facts of the case. As far as I know, the earliest reports we have is that he was fleeing a crime scene. He was fleeing a crime scene. Interesting. Does that justify driving through a parade route? Especially when, if you look at the road map, he didn't have to drive through the parade route. He wasn't trapped on the parade route and said, oh, I guess the only way out of this is to drive through a crowd of innocent people. We're really expected to believe that this man who publicly posts radicalized posts about wanting to kill police and wanting to kill white people, out on bail for hurting someone with his car, just decided to accidentally drive through a crowd of people, a parade of women and children? We're really expected to believe that. Why aren't they talking about it? Because you know why. Everyone knows why they're talking about it. And no, this isn't some call for racists everywhere to say, yeah, the problem is that he's black. No, the problem is that he's a violent criminal who expresses radicalized thoughts of violence and was in custody weeks before this and was let out for $1,000. $1,000. He was let out with multiple felonies after running a woman over his car for $1,000. And now people are dead. He killed more people than Kyle Rittenhouse. He's injured more people than Kyle Rittenhouse. He's obviously a worse person than Kyle Rittenhouse in every aspect of the world. But why is his face not plastered day and night over the news? Why are we not talking about him and the epidemic of violent felons running around because prosecutors would rather care about their feelings and equity than the safety of people in the streets? Why? It's because people in the media and people in the progressive circles know that if they give an inch, if they think they give an inch on this, that their entire narrative is out the window. And the narrative is what's important. The narrative is that America is nothing but white supremacists everywhere. The narrative is that we've never made progress and all progress is fake, according to the newest edition of the 1619 Project book. It's all fake. They live in their own world. They give themselves awards. They get contracts on TV. They get to express themselves and say things that are incorrect, and no one pushes back on them. If you do push back, you're a racist. You're a misogynist. If you're a person of color and push back, you're a puppet, or you're an internalized misogynist if you're a woman. They have every excuse to deny your valid criticisms, because what's important is what they think the audience wants to hear. And their progressive audience, filled with other progressive journalists and progressive academics and the people on Twitter who post nonstop all the time. I post on too, but I'm not one of the progressive activists, by the way. All the time, they know if they go against the narrative that people will come after them. They'll get doxxed. These people are so wrapped up in their own heads. They think that everything is white supremacy and everything is violence. Speech is violence. Speech is violence. You know what's violence? Driving your car through a parade of people. Innocent people celebrating Christmas. Innocent women and children run over by a monster. A certified monster. A radicalized, angry black man who is a monster. He's not bad because he's black. He's bad because he's a bad man. But why is this not... are people going to ask Colin Kaepernick about... Are they going to ask him to denounce this? Are they going to ask LeBron James to denounce this? We all know LeBron James picks and chooses what lives matter. Black lives matter for presentation, but Chinese lives don't matter when money's on the line. Surprise. He's a selfish person. This is how America gets red-pilled. Because everybody can see for themselves, with court records and post, that one person is not a white supremacist monster, but the entire media infrastructure painted him to be. And this other person, who is an actual monster, who supports Black Lives Matter, don't even talk about it. Briefly mentioned. Just brief. CNN barely covers it. As if he's just some other drunk, famous celebrity drunk driver waiting charges. He's a mass murderer. A man who practices violence against women. A person who shows no respect for human life or the law at all. And they let him out for $1,000. $1,000. Is that what the lives of these people are worth? To the elected officials who made this happen? Are these children and women, are their lives worth $1,000 to you? Oh, you just noticed the bail was low? Well, too fucking late for that one. Way too fucking late. Spent so much fucking time talking about Kyle Rittenhouse spreading stuff that's not true. You can't even notice the fact that violent criminals are running through your fucking neighborhood and mowing people down with cars. It's sickening. I'm so angry. I'm like insurrection angry. Because, again, so many people have failed at so many levels. And this person is a clearly unrepentant, angry monster who hates the world and took his hate out of innocent people. And it's not on every news story, not at the top of every hour. It's nowhere. Because if they talk about it, they know that people who don't want to admit that they're wrong are going to complain about it. The people who this doesn't fit their premise of white supremacist monsters be the terrorists around, not the violent felons driving around. That doesn't fit their narrative. No. That doesn't fit their narrative at all. There are no riots at Black Lives Matter protests. They're only a small percentage of it, right? There's no angry activist who posts wrong and correct information that, if you think about it, isn't its own way racist, but whatever. What the fuck, man? I can't help but think about these children. I can't help but think about kids who are enjoying Christmas crushed by a car driven by a monster. And you know what the sad part is? And I'm sure this is going to be somewhat controversial. We all know exactly why it's not being covered. Everyone knows why. Everyone knows why an active, radical, Black Lives Matter supporter, racist, misogynist, anti-trans monster isn't on top of the news story every day. It's because they think it's going to upset the feelings of the people they need to watch their shows. They don't want to hear it. They want to hear more lies about Kyle Rittenhouse and how white supremacy is in every corner than how actual violent felons are out on ridiculously low bails, still causing harm. They're robbing stores. They're shooting people. They're running over children in their cars. We're going to learn more in the days ahead. And based on just the information that we all found now, days afterwards, there's no way it's going to end up good. There's no redeeming quality in this man. There's no other side of the story. There's no justification in any way, shape, or form for driving a car through a crowd of people. But guess what you're going to see? They're going to not talk about it, or they're going to minimize it, or they're going to talk about how hard his life was and how it led him to make terrible decisions. Interesting. Interesting how a grown-ass man who espouses racist, violent, anti-trans, misogynistic views, who has committed actual crimes, isn't the top story in the world. They're still talking about Kyle Rittenhouse. Because he gave an interview with Tucker Carlson where, guess what? He made actually good points about it was self-defense. The prosecutor came after him without the valid facts of the law. That he's a Black Lives Matter supporter. And that if the prosecution can do this to him, imagine what they can do to somebody else. Exactly. It's not just that they can do it to him. It's who they choose not to prosecute. They spend their time attacking someone, charging someone with what was obviously self-defense. In the meantime, letting actual monsters out on $1,000 bail. After they ran over a woman with their car and then proceeded to run over more people with the same car. I don't know that for a fact, but I can't imagine the car would be different. But either way, running over people with their car. That footage was played on CNN about Charlottesville on loop for months afterwards. Why is it not on loop now? Why is America not being shown the truly horrific thing over and over and over again? And why they're not being told that the reason this man is out is because of people in power who care more about the feelings of violent criminals than the lives of children? Ask yourself that. And I'm sure it's already started. There's already people, one person in particular, a woman from Illinois, and, she deleted her Twitter account, but you can find it. You know what she said after it happened? It was probably self-defense. This is karma from Kenosha. And, she may have been the only person to publicly say that out loud like an idiot, but for a fact, in the immediate aftermath, that's exactly how these progressive thinkers thought. They all made jokes. It must have been self-defense. They're so angry and so misinformed that they're willing to make jokes about a mass murder casualty event at a Christmas parade full of children. It's sickening. I'm sick of these people who claim to have the moral high ground, but the second something comes out of their way and the facts don't agree, they just ignore it. They just ignore it and say whatever they want. And guess what? Most of the media, The View, Peacock, all of these shows full of these activists are just going to keep saying lies. Because that's what they feel, and that's what their audience wants to hear is lies. They don't want to know the truth. They can't understand the complexity of the world around them. They have to have this simple narrative where white supremacy is everywhere all the time. And therefore, the police department is bad. They're all corrupt. Any institution where people can succeed is corrupt. If it's the nuclear family, if it's rational line of inquiry, the scientific method, that's all white supremacy. It's all violence, apparently, because speech is violence too. And they're shocked. They're shocked when a terrible, violent person hears what they said and says, you know what? They're right. I'm allowed to be violent because the world is violent against me. It's not my fault I'm a shitty person who commits crimes. It's everyone else's fault. And if people in whatever town he was arrested in didn't take it seriously enough to keep him behind bars, that's on them. They let a monster back out on the street. Someone needs to get sued. There needs to be dozens of lawsuits against the city that let him go for this. They need to pay. They need to pay. The people in charge need to be voted out of office. Everywhere. There, here, San Francisco, all of these prosecutors who care more about the feelings of Twitter than the lives of children need to go. The only way you can do that is to vote. Need to vote. That's the only real power they have. Because it seems very clear based on what the media said in the days afterwards that they would just rather not talk about it. They're just going to briefly mention it and then go on to the next thing. We know the guys who killed Ahmaud Arbery are guilty. We know they're racist. We know they're terrible pieces of shit. I hope they go down. And again, the jury's got to make their own decisions, due process under law, all that jazz. But we all know what happened. And guess what? After Kyle Rittenhouse, we all saw what happened. It's been explained thoroughly over and over again. And they still say he's a racist. They still say he carried a gun across state lines. They still say the people that he killed are heroes. The child molester and the other domestic abuser he killed are heroes. Funny how they say lionizing Kyle Rittenhouse as a hero is disgusting, but the actual people he killed, who by the way were not great people either, they're heroes? Mark Ruffalo, actors, celebrities in Hollywood, defending these people? I mean, I guess, are we? I feel like I shouldn't be shocked. We now live in this completely siloed ecosystem where these people who are so convinced that they're right, and they're so convinced of the narrative of white supremacy and Kyle Rittenhouse being a white supremacist murderer, that even after all the facts in the world tell them they're wrong, they still say the wrong thing over and over again. These same people who think that misinformation from Trump causes violence spread their own misinformation, which causes violence, and where the fuck are they? Where are the prayers for the people of Waukesha? Where are these celebrities visiting children who were run over by a monster? They're not there. They're not helping them. They're talking about child rapists as heroes. This case, these two cases in the span of days, explain a lot. And I want you to tell something. I know I sound mad and crazy, and if you agree with me, you're not crazy. You're the sane one. You know what's happening. You can read facts. You can do critical thinking. You can hold more than one conflicting head in your thought at a time. You, person listening, whoever you are smart enough to know better. I know you know better. I know you know that driving a car through a crowd of children is terrible. I know that you know that a child rapist is not, who set dumpsters on fire trying to kill people is not a hero. I know you know that. But you may be afraid to say it because the people in the media, the people who have the influence and the power, they are pushing the narrative. And if you go against it, it's your job, it's your reputation, it's your sanity that they go after. Well, they're not going to take it away from me. They're not going to stop me from telling the truth as I see it. And guess what? I say stuff that people don't agree with on both sides, and that's just the way it is. That's the way it should be. Nobody should listen to anything, any person, and agree with them 100% of the time. Either they haven't found out enough, they haven't got enough complexity, or they really just don't have thoughts of their own. I can say January 6th was bad and caused by misinformation because I'm an adult and I know the election wasn't stolen. I know that Donald Trump is a bad person getting away with it. I can also say that Kyle Rittenhouse is not a white supremacist who murdered people because I watched the trial and I read the facts, and that's what the jury came to. That's the conclusion any person who saw the facts would come to, because that's reality. And I can also say that Darrell Brooks Jr., aka Matchboy Fly, whatever the fuck his dumbass rap name was, a violent felon with multiple violent felonies, out on bail for running over the mother of his child with his car, got out for $1,000 and ran over more women and children with his car after posting numerous statements about how white people are racist and cops deserve to die. We're really going to pretend that has nothing to do with it. We're just going to skip it and say Kyle Rittenhouse with no proof is a white supremacist, but this guy who's clearly a monster and a racist and anti-women and anti-trans. Silence. Silence. Don't talk about it. We don't know the facts. We don't know his backstory. We don't know anything about him. And I'm sure you're going to hear it. There's going to be lots more people who come on and just blatantly say the things that woman said about how they deserved it. How that's karma for letting... I'm not even going to repeat the false claims anymore because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of telling them that they're wrong even though they can fucking read and see. I know they can read. I know they're literate. I know they can see video. And I also know they're choosing to say the opposite of that because they can't let themselves or the people they think they depend on hear the truth. They need to say their own version of reality. And you know what? We've obviously grown very detached from that. Between the internet and our ability to sustain lives in alternate realities, why would they? You think anybody in MSNBC is going to apologize for saying things that aren't true? You think they're going to comb through every detail of Darrell Brooks Jr.'s life and see if there's any correlation between his anti-white, anti-police, pro-Black Lives Matter statements and his actions? No, they won't. Because they have a narrative. They have a narrative and they cannot deviate from it. And you know what? Before I yell anymore, I want to say that when it comes to humanity, people, and the way our brains work, we often all, and many times a lot of people, we exist in a narrative, right? That's how we make sense of a complicated world where sometimes facts can contradict and there are known knowns and unknown unknowns and all that nonsense. You know, in a world of complexity where between black and white there's 256 shades of gray, our evolutionary sense doesn't like uncertainty. It doesn't like facts that contradict what we want or feel is important to us. And very often, we can find whatever we want to comfort us, even if it's not true. I learned very early on that life is full of hard truths. Denying them doesn't help you or help anybody else. Denying reality on the ground does no service to you or anybody else. Because if we can't agree on what's actually happening right now in front of us, all hope is lost. Because we're on totally different wavelengths. And the fact is, listener, and based on the demographics of who listens to the show, which I'm not gonna lie, there's not a lot of people. Please share the show with your friends and neighbors if you like it. Or hit me up at NotoriousSA podcast at gmail.com or any of the social media websites. If there's something you think I want to talk about, you've got a criticism, you got a compliment, let me know. I'm open for suggestions. This is just something I do, mostly to vent and mostly to express my fear of the world. And for when I'm feeling very angry, I can put up this microphone and yell into it. And I know that at least I have what I believe the truth as I see it, based on the objective reality that I can find out there. That's what I want. Life is complicated and messy, and it's full of darkness and full of terrible people doing terrible things. But there's also goodness. There's also people who care about the truth, who want to see a better world and a better community. Some people believe they're doing that when they're not. Some people don't think they're doing that when they are. And right now, in America, what we're seeing, and I think, and my hope is that in a post-Trump world where the entire ecosystem of information doesn't revolve around one man anymore, that people can see clearly what's happening, right? When it was Trump versus the media, it was always a back and forth of who to trust and who not to trust. They got stuff wrong. He got stuff wrong a lot. But now that he's not front center anymore, look at these two cases. Look at these two very clear, very out in the open cases, and see how the people who tell you what's important and what information is needed and what is the news, look how they treat it differently. Look how Kyle Rittenhouse was, in my mind, and I will say this, unfairly dragged through the mud by people of all stripes who were mad that he shot people. And there are people who call him a hero, and I disagree with them. But now it's getting to the point where he's being smeared. He genuinely cried. He is genuinely upset about what happened. And he went on Tucker Carlson. He didn't have to say any of that stuff. He could have just gone off on a total tangent and Tucker would have gone with him. But no, what did he say? He talked about Black Lives Matter. He talked about prosecutorial misconduct. He talked about giving a fair shot to people who may not have it otherwise. And yet they still call him a monster and a fake. Where are these people with Darrell Brooks Jr.? Why are they not scouring the internet for everything he's ever said and done and posting it for the world to see? Why are they not explaining that this is a problem? This is an actual problem that affects people. White supremacists marching the streets with guns? How about violent felons let out by prosecutors who think it's more important to protect their feelings than the lives of children? You're a sane person. You hear that and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Why the hell would they do that? Ask them. Call them. They run for office. They're responsible to voters too. And guess what? In these urban areas where these white progressive people who are up their own ass about what they think is the truth convince who controls what nomination and who gets there, guess what? These people, the Kim Foxes, the other prosecutors of the world, will just let shitty people out because they think they're being equitable at the expense of the citizens they are sworn to protect. It's disgusting. It's straight up disgusting. It's malpractice that every major media outlet isn't in Waukesha right now, live streaming 24/7, talking to people, getting their stories, learning about the victims, learning about these innocent people, these children who were crushed by a vehicle driven by a monster. Why? Because anything that might make Black Lives Matter look bad or might give any indication that violent people out on bail who just happen to be black and may commit crimes again may upset the audience that doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear that the world is full of white supremacists and that these people like Darrell Brooks Jr. are the real victims, while the Kyle Rittenhouses of the world are the monsters. That is total insanity. That is gaslighting. This is how America gets red-pilled. This is how people wake up and see that the people that they're supposed to trust with their lives and their safety and information don't actually care about them. They care about hyperactive people on Twitter and in newsrooms and in academia who believe that, hey, doesn't matter what Darrell Brooks Jr. did, white supremacy is still a bigger problem. White supremacy is a bigger problem than violent felons getting back on the street and committing violent felonies, because that's what they do. Because if you don't put them in jail, they're going to keep doing it. Because the message they get is, hey, ran over my baby mama with a car, $1,000 bail, why not? Keep posting racist shit. Keep posting anti-shit. Have the media convince him that he's correct, that he's the victim in all this somehow. And that way, I just see this on the news. They pull up to this guy's house. You know what he's doing? He was watching football. Went home, murdered a bunch of people, and went home and watched football. I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse went home and watched football. I can tell Kyle Rittenhouse feels genuine sadness about what happened, even though he was legally in the right. He is going to deal with the consequences of killing people, even in self-defense, for years. This fucking monster ran over children and went home and watched football. He doesn't care about human life. He clearly thinks that Black Lives Matter is code for him to be racist to white people, to take his anger out on women and trans individuals. The only way that this type of thing doesn't happen in the future, you have to stay vigilant. You have to stay angry. You have to come after these people. These people in charge, the people in the media, the people who make the decisions about who gets out on jail, who spread lies and misinformation, who peddle this bad narrative that poisons the minds of people. You have to push back. You have to say no. You have to stand for objective truth and reality. And you know what? A lot of people don't like confrontation. A lot of people just want to say it's a difference of opinion. And if they say, you know what, I don't want to fight. You have to fight. You have to fight back. You have to stand up for truth and dignity. You have to stand up for it. Because, unfortunately, people are a lot like water. They take the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance is to not push back against academia and the media and these people who spread lies and put racism where it doesn't exist. They want to poison the world because they want to sell you the antidote. Their antidote to the poison that they injected in the first place. Make no mistake at all. The same people will say that Kyle Rittenhouse, despite all evidence to the contrary, is a racist murderer. And they'll say Darrell Brooks Jones, a racist murderer, is just misunderstood. He's just a victim of the system. You know they're going to say it. And you know these same, without even the slightest hint of irony or self-awareness, will keep talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, even though a mass murderer drove a car through a Christmas parade full of women and children. They don't want you to talk about it. They know exactly how bad it is. They know exactly who this guy is. And they know that if they think they give an inch, they admit it all, that their entire narrative goes down. Well, guess what? The narrative is wrong in the first place. And all you're doing by pushing it is making lives harder for everyone else who's just trying to live a normal life and figure out what the fuck is going on in the world. All these people in the media with their millions of dollars and their public platforms on Twitter and Facebook and social media and television have every opportunity to tell the truth, and they don't. And when hard truths stare them in the face, when a fucking monster drives a car through a parade of women and children, they just don't talk about it. They acknowledge it happened. They say it's sad, but they're not combing through every fucking Facebook post of this guy. They're not seeing the horrible shit he posts. They're not trying to make connections between his voices, his words, and his actions, which seem pretty fucking clear to anybody with a brain who can read and think. But no, they want to tell you that Kyle Rittenhouse had a plan to murder people and carried a gun across state lines with no proof. And I want to say that Darrell Brooks Jr., a monster who drove a car, was fleeing a crime scene. He was fleeing something. And we're not going to say his name, and we're not going to talk about it a lot. But you should. You should talk about it. Link in the description for my Twitter post that has the screenshots of it. And if you Google it, you can find it. There's people talking about it. Not everybody I agree with. A lot of people who I frankly would not listen to otherwise have covered it. And you know, when it comes to them, take what you will. But it's very clear to me. It's very clear to me that what we're seeing right now between this and Virginia and people pushing back is that we're not taking this narrative anymore. These people who have hijacked all the powers of influence in our country told themselves a lie so many times they believed it's true, and now they're trying to push it onto you. And they're trying to put every consequence between you and the truth, because they are the ones selling the problems, because they're the ones selling the antidotes. My thoughts and my condolences are for all the people in Waukesha. Those who lost loved ones, those whose loved ones are suffering, those poor children in the hospital. I can't stop thinking about them. I can't stop thinking about them. But you know who is stopping thinking about them? The media. Because they know if they put the whole truth out about this guy, they're going to upset a lot of people who are invested in the narrative that they put out, and they'll lose their core supporters. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of bad information meets bad action meets bad information over and over again. We cannot let up. We cannot give up. We need to push back on prosecutors who believe violent felons are more important than children. We need to push back on people in media who consist to push stuff that's not true. Court documents and all. We need to push back on these people who sell you the lie that America is full of white supremacy and tell you that every person who's part of it is part of the problem. They are the problem. They refuse to acknowledge progress. They refuse to acknowledge that people are complicated and life is messy. They refuse to accept the complexity of life and the questions of human nature that have been pondered for millennia. No, they know what's true, quote unquote. They have all the Twitter followers in the world to back them up, and it's because they disagree with you, they'll try to cancel you. They'll try to get you fired from your job. They'll stalk you at your house and they'll dox you because they're so caught up in their mindset that they are doing what's morally right. They think they can hurt anyone who gets in their way. With the sad fact being that they'll never achieve their goal because their goal is all built on false information narratives. You need to fight back. You need to push back politely with correct information. You need to take a firm stand against these people. You need to question prosecutors who let out violent felons on low bail. And if they won't answer your questions, if they won't respond to you, get rid of them. Vote them out. Watch a different channel. Don't support them financially. Use all the means at your disposal that you know they have, and they know they would do to you in a heartbeat, which they already did for Kyle Rittenhouse. Now is the time to push back. Now is the time to take the red pill and say, no more. No more. I will not let children be mowed down by a Black Lives Matter activist monster and let them get away with that and let them not talk about it. I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep posting about it. And I want the whole fucking world to know that these people let a monster out in the streets and this blood is on their hands. Darrell drove the car. But the prosecutor said the exact crime he did beforehand wasn't worth keeping him in jail. They put a notoriously violent felon back out on the streets at the public's expense. There is blood on hands. There is blood on his hands. Don't let them forget that. Justice for Waukesha. Till the next time.
Thank you.